In the late 14th century, entire cities surrendered before Timur's army even appeared on the horizon, not because they had seen his soldiers, because they had heard the stories. Merchants carried them across deserts. Travelers whispered them in crowded marketplaces. Refugees repeated them from one kingdom to the next. Every tale sounded more unbelievable than the last. Cities erased, armies annihilated, and monuments built from the remains of the defeated. To many rulers, they sounded like exaggerations, until Timur arrived at their gates. Known in Europe as Tamerlane, Timur was born near Samarkand around 1336. He was not descended directly from Genghis Khan, yet he understood the power of the Mongol legacy better than almost anyone. He claimed its spirit. He adopted many of its military traditions, and he dreamed of building an empire that rivaled the greatest conquerors in history. Unlike many kings, Timur did not inherit a stable empire. He built one through relentless campaigns. Persia, Central Asia, Mesopotamia, the Caucasus, northern India, Syria, Anatolia. One by one, powerful kingdoms collapsed before him. His armies moved with extraordinary speed. His cavalry struck unexpectedly. His intelligence networks gathered information long before battles began. But strategy alone does not explain Timur's success. Fear did. Long before his soldiers attacked, his reputation often arrived first. Some cities opened their gates immediately, hoping mercy would follow submission. Others resisted. Those cities frequently became examples. According to numerous contemporary and near-contemporary chroniclers, Timur believed terror itself could become a military weapon. If one city's destruction convinced 10 others to surrender without resistance, then countless future battles might never need to be fought. It was a brutal calculation, but an effective one. Even some of Timur's own allies struggled to understand the scale of the devastation left behind after certain campaigns. Victories were celebrated, yet the silence that followed was often more memorable than the battle itself. Entire regions could be transformed in a matter of days. Still, reducing Timur to simple cruelty misses something important. He was also a remarkable organizer, a patron of architecture, a builder of Samarkand, a ruler who surrounded himself with scholars, artisans, and engineers brought from across his empire. The same man who ordered magnificent mosques and gardens could also order punishments that terrified the medieval world. That contradiction made Timur one of history's most unsettling rulers, because he believed civilization and destruction could serve the same purpose. And nowhere would that belief become clearer than in the city of Isfahan. By the winter of 1387, much of Persia had already fallen before Timur's armies. City after city had accepted his authority. Some surrendered without a fight. Others negotiated favorable terms. Timur had developed a reputation that often achieved what his cavalry did not. Fear persuaded cities long before swords ever could. Then came Isfahan, one of the wealthiest and most beautiful cities in Persia. Known for its scholars, merchants, craftsmen, and magnificent architecture, Isfahan occupied a strategic position that Timur could not ignore. When his army first arrived, the city surrendered. Timur accepted its submission. A tribute was imposed. A garrison remained behind to maintain order. For a brief moment, it appeared that Isfahan had escaped the fate suffered by other resisting cities. But peace proved fragile. Shortly after Timur's main army departed, tensions inside the city exploded. The exact sequence of events differs across historical accounts, but contemporary and near-contemporary chroniclers broadly agree that a violent uprising erupted against Timur's occupying forces. Many of his soldiers were killed. To Timur, this was not merely rebellion. It was betrayal. A city that had already sworn loyalty had broken its oath. And in Timur's view, betrayal demanded an unforgettable response. He immediately turned his army back toward Isfahan. The city's defenders now understood what they had invited. There would be no second negotiation, no revised treaty, no mercy. When Timur's forces entered the city once again, they encountered scattered resistance. What followed became one of the most infamous episodes associated with his campaigns. Persian historians, later chroniclers, and several medieval writers describe widespread killings after the city was retaken. Many accounts also claim that Timur ordered towers to be constructed from the skulls of the dead. The exact number of victims remains fiercely debated by modern historians. Some medieval sources speak of tens of thousands of deaths. Others provide even larger figures. Today, most scholars caution that medieval chroniclers frequently exaggerated casualty numbers to emphasize the scale of victory or horror. The precise total may never be known. What is not seriously disputed is that the punishment inflicted upon Isfahan was catastrophic. Its purpose extended beyond revenge. It was communication. Timur wanted every neighboring ruler to hear what had happened, not through official proclamations, through terrified survivors. News spread astonishingly fast. Merchants carried the stories across caravan routes. Travelers repeated them from Persia to Anatolia. Diplomats warned their kings. Some accounts undoubtedly grew more dramatic with every retelling, yet that actually served Timur's interests, because psychological warfare depends as much upon reputation as reality. The more frightening the stories became, the fewer cities wished to test whether they were true. According to several historical sources, even commanders serving alongside Timur were disturbed by the scale of the destruction. Victory itself did not surprise them. The message left behind did. For Timur, however, the lesson was simple. One city's suffering could spare months of future campaigning. One terrifying example could convince dozens of other cities to surrender without resistance. It was a brutal military philosophy. And for years, it worked. By the end of the 14th century, Timur commanded one of the most formidable armies on earth. His cavalry moved with astonishing speed. His engineers mastered siege warfare. His generals coordinated campaigns across deserts, mountains, and vast plains. Yet none of these was his greatest weapon. His greatest weapon was fear. Long before his banners appeared on the horizon, entire kingdoms already believed they knew what would happen if they resisted. That belief became part of Timur's strategy. Unlike many medieval rulers, Timur understood that the mind could be conquered before the battlefield. If an enemy surrendered without a fight, he saved time. He preserved soldiers. He conserved supplies. And he could move quickly toward his next objective. In many cases, cities that opened their gates immediately were treated very differently from those that chose resistance. Submission often brought negotiated terms. Resistance could bring catastrophe. It was a brutal but deliberate system. The message spread rapidly across Asia. Do not force Timur to prove his reputation. One campaign demonstrated this philosophy with chilling clarity. In 1398, Timur invaded northern India. His target was the wealthy Delhi Sultanate. Delhi was one of the richest cities in the medieval world. Its markets overflowed with gold, silk, spices, and precious stones gathered from across the Indian subcontinent. Capturing it promised unimaginable wealth. But the campaign also presented enormous risks. According to several contemporary and near-contemporary sources, Timur's army had taken thousands of prisoners during its advance. As the decisive battle approached, he feared these captives might revolt from within the camp if fighting erupted. What followed remains one of the most controversial episodes of his career. Multiple medieval chroniclers report that Timur ordered the mass execution of many prisoners before the battle to eliminate that risk. Modern historians continue to debate the exact numbers, and medieval figures are often regarded with caution. Even so, the event itself is widely acknowledged as one of the darkest moments of the campaign. After defeating the Delhi Sultanate, Timur entered the city. Contemporary accounts describe widespread destruction, looting, and loss of life, though the scale varies significantly between sources. The consequences were devastating. Delhi took years to recover. Once again, fear had become part of the conquest. Then came Baghdad, a city whose name still echoed with memories of the Abbasid Caliphate and centuries of learning. When resistance emerged, Timur responded with the same uncompromising logic that had defined earlier campaigns. Several Persian and Arab chroniclers describe extensive destruction following the city's capture. Stories of towers built from human skulls appear once more in later narratives. Whether every detail occurred exactly as described remains impossible to prove. Some historians argue that later writers amplified these accounts to emphasize Timur's terrifying reputation. Others believe at least some of the reports reflected real practices used as psychological warfare. What cannot be disputed is the result. His enemies believed them, and that belief changed military decisions across an entire continent. Cities surrendered. Rulers negotiated. Generals reconsidered battle plans, not because Timur had already defeated them, but because they feared becoming the next example. By now, his reputation had become something larger than the man himself. It marched ahead of every army. It entered every city before the first horseman arrived. And sometimes, that invisible army proved even stronger than the real one. By 1402, there were few rulers left in the Islamic world who could rival Timur. One of them was Bayezid I. Known as Yildirim, the Thunderbolt, Bayezid had transformed the Ottoman state into one of the fastest-growing powers in Europe and Anatolia. He had defeated crusading armies, expanded deep into the Balkans, and laid siege to Constantinople itself. To many observers, it seemed inevitable that the Ottomans would become the next great empire. Timur saw something different. He saw a rival. The two rulers exchanged a series of increasingly hostile letters. Each questioned the other's legitimacy. Each demanded submission. Neither would yield. War became unavoidable. Their armies met near Ankara in July 1402. It was one of the largest and most consequential battles of the medieval world. Timur arrived with a vast multinational force drawn from across Central Asia, Persia, and beyond. Bayezid relied on experienced Ottoman troops, elite janissaries, cavalry, and loyal Anatolian allies. But Timur had spent weeks shaping the battlefield before the first sword was drawn. He secured water sources, forced the Ottomans to march across exhausted terrain, and exploited political divisions within Bayezid's coalition. When the battle began, several Anatolian contingents that had previously served under Timur, or whose rulers had been displaced by the Ottomans, changed sides or abandoned the field. The exact timing and scale of these defections remain debated, but contemporary sources broadly agree that they severely weakened Bayezid's position. The Ottoman lines began to fracture. Still, Bayezid refused to retreat. He continued fighting alongside his elite troops as the situation deteriorated around him. By the end of the battle, the Ottoman army had collapsed. For the first time in decades, the seemingly unstoppable Ottoman advance had been halted. Then came the moment that stunned the medieval world. Bayezid was captured alive. The image of one of the most powerful rulers of his age falling into enemy hands spread across Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia with astonishing speed. Stories soon followed. Some claimed Timur kept Bayezid imprisoned inside an iron cage. Others described constant humiliation and public mockery. These accounts became famous for centuries. Modern historians, however, urge caution. While Bayezid was unquestionably taken captive and died several months later in Timur's custody, many of the more dramatic stories about an iron cage or deliberate public humiliation originate in later sources and may reflect legend more than established fact. Even without embellishment, the reality was extraordinary. An emperor had fallen. An empire entered crisis. Following Bayezid's capture, the Ottoman state descended into an interregnum, a civil war among his sons that lasted more than a decade. The consequences reshaped southeastern Europe and Anatolia. Once again, Timur had demonstrated that victory did not end on the battlefield. It continued in the political chaos left behind. Yet something else had begun to change. The destruction left in Timur's wake had become so immense that even some rulers who benefited from his victories started questioning the cost. His allies admired his genius, but many feared what might happen if they ever stood in his way, because Timur's loyalty lasted only as long as his ambitions, and history had already shown no city, no kingdom, no ally was completely safe. By the beginning of 1405, Timur had conquered an empire that stretched from the borders of India to the eastern Mediterranean. Few rulers in history had expanded so far, so quickly. His victories over Persia, the Delhi Sultanate, the Golden Horde, and the Ottoman Empire had transformed the political map of Asia. Yet Timur was not finished. Even in his late 60s, he was preparing for the greatest campaign of his life. His next target was the Ming China. Thousands of soldiers gathered. Supply caravans stretched across Central Asia. Engineers, cavalry, and commanders prepared for another war that many believed would eclipse all those before it. But the invasion never began. In the winter of 1405, while marching east, Timur fell ill near the city of Otrar. Within days, the conqueror who had terrified continents was dead. Unlike Genghis Khan, Timur had built an empire that depended heavily on his own leadership. There was no stable system ready to hold it together without him. Almost immediately, rival princes began competing for power. Governors asserted their independence. Alliances dissolved. The empire that had expanded with astonishing speed began to fracture almost as quickly. His descendants would continue to rule parts of Central Asia for generations. Most famously, his great-great-grandson Babur would establish the Mughal Empire in India, carrying Timurid culture into a new age. But Timur's own empire never regained the unity it had possessed during his lifetime. Its political borders faded. Its military machine disappeared. Its ruler became history. Yet something survived. His reputation. For centuries, chroniclers across Persia, the Ottoman world, Europe, India, and Central Asia described Timur as one of history's most formidable conquerors. Some praised his military brilliance. Others condemned his extraordinary brutality. Many accounts were shaped by fear, admiration, politics, or later legend. Modern historians continue to debate individual episodes, casualty figures, and dramatic stories associated with his campaigns. Some medieval chroniclers clearly exaggerated numbers to magnify either his glory or his cruelty. But one conclusion remains remarkably consistent. Timur understood psychological warfare better than almost any commander of his age. He realized that destroying an enemy's confidence could be as decisive as defeating an enemy's army. A reputation carefully cultivated could conquer cities before a single arrow was released. That strategy echoed long after his death. Future rulers studied him. Military historians analyzed his campaigns. His victories became lessons in mobility, intelligence, logistics, and intimidation. Even today, Timur remains one of history's most contradictory figures. He filled Samarkand with magnificent architecture while leaving devastation across distant battlefields. He welcomed scholars, artists, and engineers into his court while waging relentless campaigns against rival kingdoms. He built, he destroyed, he inspired, he terrified. Perhaps that is why his story still unsettles us. Not because history lacks other conquerors, but because few understood, as completely as Timur did, that fear itself could become an empire. The cities he conquered eventually rebuilt. The kingdoms he defeated eventually returned. But the stories marched farther than his armies ever could. And 6 centuries later, they still have the power to make the world stop and listen.